Good afternoon. I'm Julie Decker, President and CEO of the FSU Alumni Association. I and my team are so delighted to welcome you back to the fourth iteration of our Webinar Wednesday series. This series was planned to offer you guidance from notable alumni and university staff who have knowledge and advice to share on their specialized areas. Many of you joining us today are members of the Alumni Association, and I thank you for your commitment to this university and to our organization. I would also like to thank our corporate partners for their generous support, which makes programs like our Webinar Wednesday series possible. Thank you. I have the pleasure of introducing our presenter and National Board of Director, John Crossman. John is the CEO of Crossman Career Builders. He and his team provide resources to executives in corporations in the form of consulting, public speaking, and writing on some of the most challenging topics facing leaders today. This includes career development, relationship development, mental health issues, addiction, race relations, suicide, and communication. In addition, Crossman Career Builders provides numerous resources to college students and young professionals. This includes 6 endowed scholarships at 5 universities, lectures, mentoring, and internships. John is the author of the best-selling book, Career Killers and Career Builders. He graduated from FSU in 1993 with a BS in real estate. John was inducted into the FSU College of Business Hall of Fame in 2013, and he remains the youngest inductee of all time. Today, John will discuss his advice for leaders, the importance of a relationship development in crisis, and his advice for career development. Thank you so much for joining us today, John. We're so happy to have you.
Well, thank you so much. I'm delighted to be here with you. And it's okay, I'll just go and get started. First off, I want to say that going to FSU and my experience there fundamentally changed my life. And I truly believe that every opportunity I can have to serve the university, to serve the Alumni Association is an honor. So I'm totally thrilled with that. And then secondly, I want to say, Julie, I'm just so impressed with your leadership, your staff and your team. You guys do amazing work, and you're doing exactly what I'm going to be talking about, which is being great leaders in a time of a crisis. So thank you so much. I want to start off by challenging all of you to visualize something with me. I want to visualize that you're at work and you're in an office building and you're doing your normal day routine at the office, and all of a sudden, you smell something and it's not right. And then you see some smoke, and then an alarm goes off, and you realize, man, this building is on fire. And this is not a drill, this is a real thing. And so you hustle like everybody else, and you run, and you get it down the stairwell, and the doors open. As you go into the running in the parking lot, trying to get safe, you see a huge fire truck, and you see these firemen now running towards the building, and you immediately feel better because they're there, and they're there to help and keep everybody safe and put the fire out. So it's an interesting thing, because as a society, when we think about firemen are running into the building when everybody else is running out. And as a society, we revere firemen, we respect firemen, we have parades that are in, and we cheer them on, and as we should, because they risk their lives to help us in times of crisis. That's pretty amazing. It's pretty awesome. And when we think about what we're facing now with COVID-19, beyond the firemen, it's the nurses and the doctors and all these different people who are making sacrifices to take care of us. I actually went to my dentist this morning and got my teeth cleaned, and they had a process where they took my temperature in my car before I walked in. And, I could tell that they're all working hard, and it's stressful because their work requires so much more, right? So fire, the virus, leadership, right? So let's take that a step further with this COVID-19. What does that mean in the context of our economy being on fire, or a small business, being on fire, or a household being on fire? You might not, I'm not literally, of course, talking about that, but if you have a couple of 4 and 5-year-olds in your house for a month straight, you'll know what I'm talking about. I have 2 teenage daughters, and so I have moments of that myself that I kind of would prefer to have a fire. But my point being is this, is that leaders in times of crisis must be relevant. And as leaders, we need to make a choice to lean in and deal with these critical issues. Much like how a fireman is dealing with those issues, we need to be those. I will tell you that when I think about times like these as a leader, this might sound odd, but I feel energized in a way. I, of course, have all kinds of range of emotions dealing with things, but the reason why I feel energized is I know that my staff and my areas of influence need me. When things are going great, leaders a lot of times are not as relevant. But when things are tough, when things are bad, when things are hard, that's when we need leaders to step in. And so I would challenge you as an opening topic to think about, if you're a leader, you're the fireman. You're a mom and dad, you're the fireman. This is the time for you to push in and help deal with these big problems. The other thing I will tell you is that I will go and make this statement, that I predict to you that greatness will come out of these times. When we look back in our history, there are companies that started during the Great Depression. There are companies that were born out of the Great Depression, companies that were born out of the Great Recession. We know that all kinds of greatness has happened through history when times are really, really tough. They push into things. And so while the pain of the process is not fun, I don't wish that on anybody, of course, there is benefit to it, how it pushes us. So three things I want to touch on, and then Julie will get us back and we'll do some Q&A. So the first one I wanted to go a little bit deeper on was the topic of leading in crisis, and what does that look like? And just a few things I wanted to share. The first one is communication. A friend of mine wrote a book called Surviving the Economic Meltdown. He wrote it in 2008 when we were all going through such a tough time. And one of the things he talked about was a guy he knew that was going through bankruptcy. And what he did was every single Wednesday, he called his bank. And whether he had an update or not, he called them. He stayed in front of them. One of the guys I know that really liked that book, he and I and a couple other guys were partners on a big real estate deal. And the guy that was running our real estate deal died. And we thought he was murdered. And then we found out later on that he had committed suicide because he'd stolen a bunch of our money and he was about to get caught. And so the guy that took over the account to help figure this all out, he actually wrote all the investors, a small group of us, a letter once a week for a year, and then once a month for a year, and then once a quarter for a year. And then he got all our money out. And so now I never hear from him. I'm kind of kidding, but you get my point is that the communication, the dialogue is so key. It's not a time to shrink down. It's a time to be visible. The other aspect I want to talk about with leaders in crisis and communication, there is a real importance to listening. Sometimes I think leaders in times like these want to hunker down and just kind of like fight through it. And there's value in that, and I respect that. At the same time, you got to know that the people around you have all different kind of dynamics. You might be in an age that you're super healthy, and the people around you are super healthy and they're the right age, but they may have an elderly family member that maybe had a pre-existing health issue that's living in their house or living across the street, or again, maybe they have kids, young kids that they need to be concerned about. And so the people around you have sometimes there's irrational fear, but there's a lot of legitimate fear. There's a lot of legitimate issues. And so taking the time to listen to your staff, when I go back to firemen, isn't it interesting when you think about firemen or emergency response people, they're pretty calm, when they're doing things. And they're also heavy into communication because they're talking to it, listening to each other and gathering information. The second thing I wanted to say about leaders in crisis is that I think it's so crucial to adapt and be creative. The things that we did through the Great Recession in 2008, 2009 don't apply here. It's not the same situation. Back then, we were totally worried about the banks. Well, we're not worried about the banks today. Restaurants are things that we're really worried about. The movie theater industry we're worried about. We're worried about opening too soon, opening too late. And so we have to sort of adapt and be creative in this time. And so our old business plans in some ways get thrown out the window to adapt to what's happening now. And so I'll tell you two interesting things about that. One is that during the Great Recession, the real estate market was just awful. And I could have left my office every day at 2 o'clock because there were times when you just ran out of things to do. There was no deal flow. And so during that time, two of my nieces, who are now in their 30s, and back then they were teenagers or close to it, they both messaged me and said, Uncle John, why aren't you on Facebook? And I specifically remember saying, what is Facebook? I don't even know. I don't know what that is. I remember having a conversation like, what's YouTube, right? So these were new things. And so what I thought about is that in that time, we didn't have a lot of money. We had time, and marketing and being visible was, I thought, a good thing to do. So I had a 22-year-old college intern, and she and I just started going crazy on social media. We took a lot of calculated risk, but we got out there and pushed and pushed and pushed to try to make some things happen. And would you believe that about 8 months later, I got contacted by a Fortune 150 company, and they said, we're trying to figure out this whole social media thing. You didn't seem like you know what you're doing. Will you please come to our corporate offices and give us some training? And I did. We did. We went to their corporate headquarters and we told them everything that we were doing. Would you believe that all these years later, I'm still doing business with that client in different kind of capacities, but that was a really key moment in our relationship. I would have never had that meeting or gotten into it if I wasn't forced to because of the tough time. Here's a different one. There's a Publix in my neighborhood we go to all the time. And just a few doors down from it is my favorite restaurant, which is Sato Sushi. And so we get sushi all the time. So during this whole crazy crisis we've been through, Publix has had almost no toilet paper. But guess who has been selling toilet paper? That's right, Sato Sushi. The sushi guy is selling toilet paper. And so, I mean, in my neighborhood, you can message them and say, I'd like 10 rolls delivered to my house. And not only will you can buy sushi, they'll deliver it to you. Now, here's what's, to me, as you dig into that, it's a little bit more interesting is in the world of having leases and running properties, it's actually a violation of Sato Sushi's lease to be selling that toilet paper. And it's a violation specific of Publix's lease, right? So, very easily the owner of the property could say, hey, Sato Sushi, you can't sell that toilet paper. And Publix could step in and say, hey, this guy's violating. But they're not doing that, are they? The owner of the shopping center is saying nothing. They're allowing them to do it. Publix is allowing them to do it. In fact, encouraging this. And I had a conversation with a senior Publix guy the other day who said to me, he goes, John, he goes, as long as this is going on, we're letting all kinds of things like that slide, right? That's adaptive. That's creative. It's creative both on the sushi tenant and both on Publix and being sensitive and being aware of that. It's funny, in that same conversation with that Publix executive, I said, man, what a bunch of crazy times, for you guys. And of course their sales are way up. So you'd say that's good. And immediately this executive went to, oh gosh, John, I'm just so upset and concerned. And I said, what are you so concerned about? He goes, we're not taking good enough care of our customers. We don't have enough products in. And you could tell how burdened he was from that. And then he started talking about all the different ways they were trying to do to help customers and people in need. And you could just feel his heart, which was pretty cool. So as leaders in crisis, we need to be able to adapt, be creative. The third one, as far as leading crisis, is that I think that there's real value in making sure you're getting your rest and modeling that. When you fly in an airplane and you get the directions of if the oxygen mask drop down, you put it on yourself first and the child second. Why is that? It's like that because if you put the mask on the child first, you're dead, and then you can't help the child. And what I'm seeing a lot of when I'm talking to leaders in this time is they're in exhaustion. And, that's going to bite us all. If we all get too tired, we're more likely to get the virus, but we're more likely to have other health issues. And that puts us in a position that we can't help other people. So I tell you as leaders, it's old school of, making sure you're measuring your hours of sleep, making sure you're getting some light exercise, do some journaling, doing some mindfulness, some mental health stuff, calling a good friend. Like I might call Julie and just complain about something, but I get things off my chest. And so I'm feeling my feelings, which is a good thing. And we're processing that. And then with our employees, we need to do the same thing. And if we see some that are pushing themselves too hard or maybe they're just feeling things overwhelming, encouraging that practice of mental health is really key. I want you to remember as leaders that we will get defined by how we behave when we're needed the most. And people need leaders right now. And so really being thoughtful and intentional with that is just super, super important. So let me go to my second big point, and that is being an employee in a time of crisis. And what does that look like? Well, first off, I want to define the word leadership. I read a book one time that said that a leader is anyone who seeks to influence others or seeks to influence a process or organization. So by their definition, a leader is a teacher, a leader is a coach, a leader is a parent. So one time, my company is real small. We got asked by a big company, big Fortune 500 company, if we consider ourselves to be leaders in the industry. And I put that definition out there and I said, by that definition, I consider myself to be a leader in the industry, even though I have a little small company. The reason why is because I'm seeking to influence the industry, right? Like by writing a book and giving speeches and leaning in there on tough conversations. I want to do things to help influence and make the business community a healthier and better place. So you're an employee at a company. You don't have a big fancy title. You don't have a bunch of direct reports. Can you be a leader? You can, absolutely you can. You could be the receptionist, you could be a janitor, you could be a security guard, you could be an assistant or analyst or any number of positions in a company and be a leader. As long as you make the mental choice that you're going to influence others, okay? And so I would tell you that as an employee in a company in a time of crisis, here's what I tell you to do. Don't complain, don't gossip, don't do anything that's going to make the situation exasperated. Don't be a fear monger. Don't, all those kinds of things that are toxic and poisonous. You got to go for a good long run before you go into work or whatever you need to do to get that out. And then when you're at work, you need to do everything you can to influence other people. I'll give you an example. And one of them is just being a good old fashioned cheerleader. I have a friend of mine who's got a very cool job, senior job, and he works for economic development for a community. And he and I are buddies. And so during this time, I was thinking about him and all the responsibilities of his job. And so I emailed him and I said, hey, gosh, is there anything I can do to help you out? Let me know. And so he emailed me a video, a really cool video that his economic development group had done for the community. And he said, hey, would you mind sharing this on your social media and promoting it? And I said, man, no, I'm glad to do it. Super cool. So I put the video on my Facebook page and I might have put it on LinkedIn or something like that. And I just said, oh, hey, check this out. Well, that was several days ago. And yesterday, a kind of nutty guy commented on my post on my page, and his comment to me promoting this video and honoring this leadership in this community, he commented, WTF, question mark. That was his comment to me. I don't know this guy. And so I replied back to him and I just said, thanks for sharing that. I really support these local leaders. I think they're doing a great job. And I went on and said that. And then he came back and said something else kind of kooky. And I said another thing like that and kind of went back and forth. I think I finally wore him down, but I really tried to be kind and reaffirming my position. And then I kind of forgot about it. I was like, just started to think about it. And then this morning, I saw on Facebook had all these activity, and it was the Economic Development Commission, the committee, going by and liking every single one of my comments. I was shocked. It didn't really occur to me that they'd be reading them, but they were, right? And that was encouraging. If anybody is just watching the news, reading the news, they're going to get down. Like all the memes we've all seen about this crazy 2020 year and all these bad things happening, there's enough discouragement. So everything you can do to encourage, be a cheerleader, be positive. And here's the key thing, being a problem solver, being a problem solver. I go back to SATA when that toilet paper issue, like they're solving a problem, right? And so, gosh, if you're at your office and you're thinking, man, some people aren't wearing masks, instead of thinking to yourself, they're terrible people for not wearing masks, maybe they don't have any masks. I mean, maybe you can help find some masks to give to them, right? So finding ways to be a solution. Maybe you have the ability to work a ton of hours, but somebody else is more limited, and maybe you can help give them some of your time, or you can work from home and somebody can't, so you work from home so that you give the other person some space that they can come in, because that's how they need to do it. I think finding every way to try to be about solving problems. I have another client I was consulting with last couple of days, and they have a shopping center and a bunch of their tenants are reopening. And so the question is that how do we let people know these tenants are open for business? And so we just spent a lot of time brainstorming and then contacting different people and saying, what can we do to get people on property, and providing discounts and providing some, a free lunch at one restaurant or some free carry out. But that connectivity, that community, that positivity is such a key part of it. Most people complain, and then the second amount of people do nothing. And then the people that are out there really pushing positive and solutions and helping make a difference. I am amazed at the number of things that I love that when I see on social media, I comment and post that I'm like the only one, or I'm only a handful of people. And I don't want to be defined by the things I hate, like the Gators. I do hate them. I'm kidding. No, I'm serious. But I don't want to be defined by that. What I want to be defined by is the things I love and the things I'm passionate about, the things I care about, and the things that I want to make impact on. And so finding healthy ways to do that. So my last point is talking about leading or being unemployed in a crisis, or the way I was saying it is that how do you lead when you're unemployed in a crisis? Well, here's my simple piece of advice about it. First one, if you're unemployed, treat finding a job as a full-time job. So what does that mean? That means get up at 6:30 in the morning and do some exercise, eat a healthy breakfast, get ready for the day. And then at 8:30 in the morning, you're working. You're working at 8:30, doing everything you can to find a job. And somebody might say, well, there's nothing to do. That is not true. There's all kinds of ways that you can reach out and communicate and, contact people, work your contacts, work your relationships, and reach out to folks. And work until 12, take a lunch break, then commute back working until 5:30. Like, set your day that you're working regular hours and until you find something. Now, what if you start doing that and you're like, gosh, John, honestly, I can't find anything. Then my advice would be is volunteer. Spend a bunch of that time trying to find volunteer work. And you might say, well, gosh, John, where can you possibly, volunteer? Well, you just don't know until you ask, and you never know what organizations might need some help. But what happens is when you volunteer, it gets your mind going. You're being creative. It helps your energy level. You can be more positive and uplifting. You're helping somebody. You never know if that volunteer position may become a permanent position, right? Maybe you could do something and that comes into a full-time job, okay? And then also it gives you reason to be public. I talk about being encouraging, but if you go onto your LinkedIn and social media and you just say, hey, this week I'm volunteering at, whatever organization, whatever you're doing, and promoting it, it helps to keep you top of mind. The other thing I would say in that whole scenario is encourage others. As you're out there looking for employment, what are some ways that, maybe you're aware of other people looking for employment, and you give them leads. If you hear about someone that's not a match for you, pass it on to somebody else. But that energy, that push is what is so desperately needed right now. And there's lots and lots of places where people need help and need encouragement. You can do that. I know that a lot of college students are really concerned about graduating, and I know that a lot of them are concerned about finding employment, and I get that. It's a scary time. But one of my pieces of advice that would be is maybe contact somebody and say, hey, I really need to find a summer job. I don't have anything. Could I just come and volunteer for you for a half day? Come to your office, do whatever you need me to do. I'm going to volunteer for a half day. And if that goes well, maybe let me volunteer for another half day, right? At the same time, you're still looking for a job. If you get a full-time real job, that's great. But you're just making that effort to lean in and build those relationships with people. Last thing with all this, I would tell you is that, I talk a lot about the importance of relationship development. And, what does that mean? Well, part of it, what it means is leveraging all the different connections you have. And sometimes people say to me, well, I don't really have a lot of connections. And I'm like, well, you probably have more than you think. That's one of the reasons why you're involved with Alumni Association. The old expression, it's not what you know, it's who you know. That expression is actually wrong. It's who knows you, right? And so wherever you are, do you know the FSU alums in your community? Do you know that, like, if you email an executive and the subject line says, I'm seeking a job, maybe they'll look on it. You put the subject line, FSU rocks, or, something cool announcement at FSU, and then you say, hey, I thought you might want to see this article or see this new screensaver thing or something like that about FSU. When you have that connectivity, then that leads into a conversation. And then the last thing is sort of just on that whole, the relationship part. I do a longer version of this, but I often challenge people to think about, what does the word mentorship mean? And then we think a little bit about what the word charity means. And then what does the word relationship mean? Well, charity is when we give and we receive nothing back. And it's one-sided. Relationships are a healthy giving and receiving. Relationships are, how are you, look at me. And if there's not a balance to that, it's not really a relationship, and it's probably not going to end well. Charity relationships don't typically go long-term. So when people in business are seeking mentors, I always say, are you seeking to have a mentor relationship, or to be a mentor charity case? Okay. If you're a mentor charity case, you're going to get a little bit of help for a little bit of time. But mentor relationships, that lasts a lifetime. And so what I would tell you is that at any point you're thinking in your mind that you're going to reach out to somebody and you want help from them, think about what it is you're going to do to help them, right? If you're asking them for a job or wisdom or connectivity or whatever, what are you going to also be able to bring to the table? And that might just simply be a handwritten thank you note. That might just simply be, again, encouraging, or posting something great on social media. But really work to make sure you're staying in balance. You don't want to be the kind of person that jumps out to all these people only when there's a crisis. And you don't want to be a person that just receives all the time. You want to make sure that you're giving and are in balance, And listen, if you're somebody that's on this that actually is in a great position and you have extra time, you have extra money, resources, now's the time to maybe find some ways that you can help. And you could contact people like Julie and some other people in leadership positions and say, hey, maybe I could help out some people who are really struggling during this time. What can I do? What can I do to be of service? And we have lots of great leaders in our community that can help connect them with people in need. With that, I think I'm done. I hope that was enough.
Perfect. Wonderful. John, you can see me on your screen?
Yep, I see you.
Good. Wonderful. I'm here. Wonderful to see everyone. Thank you so much. I knew that you were going to be fantastic, and I'm so thankful that you could be with us today. I wrote many notes that I want to talk with you through as we go through a little bit of Q&A, but I'm going to go through some of the questions that were submitted ahead of time.
Okay.
The first one being, what advice can you give to leaders who are finding it challenging to motivate their teams who are new to working remotely right now?
Right. Well, I think that there's several things. The first off is I really like being informational and inspirational. Like it's like with my kids, I like with my teenage daughter saying, hey, grandma's in need, we can't visit her and I worry about being alone. I really need you to help check on her and be part of this solution, right? And I find that to be very empowering, to my children, like, hey, I have value, I have purpose. And so I think that when you're taking the time with a remote employee and you're saying, hey, you have value, you have purpose, like what you're doing here is very impactful, it's meaningful, right? When I was at the dentist this morning, the hygienist got done and I looked at her, I said, what you are doing are so important. You were doing something very important, because I wanted her to know that, because I believe it, but also help motivate her throughout her day. So if you have remote employees, I think that there's that. So that's right. The second thing I'd say is listen. I think taking time to check in with employees. I have a woman I work with, and she doesn't work direct for me, but we work same area. And we were talking recently, and her granddaughter is on a aircraft carrier like out in the Pacific somewhere, and you have had all those concerns about COVID. Well, the other day I checked in and I said, how's your granddaughter? She said, oh, she has COVID. She tested positive, right? And so I'm really glad I'm aware of that. And so when I see her, I know she's still working hard, but I really go in and say, hey, you know, how's your granddaughter doing? Does she need anything? But you got to slow down. You got to listen to people, right? So if somebody's working out of their home, you know, how is that going for them? And are they having any particular struggles? Maybe they need to be on Zoom calls and they're doing them on their phone because they don't have a camera. And maybe you could have a camera sent to them, right? So there's that listening. And then I think the third thing is I would give some people some grace. And like it's a complex time. I think there's a lot of complex emotions. And so I would say, you know, sometimes some things happen. My guy that works with me and helps out with computer stuff, he got a text at 2 a.m. that his nanny was sick. And so he texted me at 6 a.m. I'm glad he waited till 6 a.m. and he texted me and said, wasn't a meeting today. And of course I was super relaxed with that. I mean, it's crazy times, like, right? Like it's okay. You know, it's totally okay. So those are maybe the 3 quick advice on those.
So in your book, Career Killers and Career Builders, you give a lot of recommendations for millennials. What advice from that book do you think can be applied to those more seasoned professionals who are probably 2 or 3 jobs into their career, or maybe have had a good career span?
Yeah. Well, you know, one thing that I found interesting in all the research and work I've done is that when you're working with, you know, super achiever kids, like kids that go to FSU and then 10 years later and they're doing super achieving things, sometimes people have asked me that, do I see in them their challenge being dealing with failure for the first time? And I don't see as much as that as I have seen people in their 30s realizing that achievement didn't fill them up the way they thought it would, right? And so what I would tell you is that, to answer your question, if somebody's like in their 30s or 40s and I'm pushing 50 and that kind of stuff, I have had in my 40s, I have learned some stuff that I have found embarrassing. I'm embarrassed I learned in my 40s. I don't know how I missed that and learned earlier. And so I would tell you the advice from the book is to really lean into yourself. And that might look like seeing a professional counselor. You know, like sometimes I was telling somebody this morning, I said, you know, one of the ways to look at your life is what gets you really angry, like, and what doesn't impact you at all. I'll confess this to you, Julie, that there was a time in my life that I got more angry about FSU losing a football game than I did about homeless in my community, right? And when I really reflected on that, I was like, gosh, that is embarrassing. That is embarrassing. And it's not that I shouldn't cheer for FSU. I should. Every good American should. But you know, being concerned about people in the community, obviously that is more important, and working that through. Why is this important? So I would tell people, like, really looking to understand your feelings, your wounding. What is your driver? What's driving you to do what you're doing? And so, and I will tell you that to learn that about yourself requires a lot of hard work. All of us, you know, Anthony Bourdain, Kate Spade, these were people well into their careers. I mean, at the height of their careers, and then they took their own lives. How does that happen, right? Everything they had wasn't getting them there. And so I would submit to you, there probably was some internal wounding they weren't quite processing through. And so to deal with that, you have to add skills. It takes a lot of painful, hard work, and it's very worthy. It's very, very worthy. I'm not the same person I was 10 years ago, and I don't think I'm the same person I was 5 years ago. And to get where I feel a lot healthier and more peace about my life has been very painful and very rewarding.
So when you mentioned going to the dentist and they took your temperature, and you told the woman, thank you, this is important work. And not to placate her, because you said you believe that's important work. And I find you and our interactions for you to be very readily accessing your understanding of those values and those beliefs that way. And it sounds to me like some work you did in your 30s and 40s led you to better articulate that, which means probably removing some fear, which you talked about earlier. Fear leading to certain behaviors. What do you think are the 1 or 2 things that you did to get to the core of addressing that fear, or might you advise others to address their fears?
So one thing I would tell you that I made a lot of mistakes, did something. One of the things I think I did right was, I will tell you that when something big enters your life, you need to take something big out. And look, I'm a guy that I would love to sleep in every Saturday morning and watch College Game Day and then watch 12 hours of football. And when I was in college, I never missed a game. When my daughters were born, and of course now they're 16 and 15, from the time they're born until today, I've seen one full college football game. One. Mm-hmm. And it's not that I don't love it. It's that as they came into the world, I pushed that aside to be focused on them. And I'm really glad I'd made that investment. And so I think that, you can't be so busy that there's no time to think and feel and process things. So I think you've got to go through seasons and put things on shelves and learn how to say no. The second thing I would tell you is that I wish I could tell you that I'm so mature and so enlightened that I was able to come to some conclusions. But I think the two quick ones, one would be is in 2004 when my dad passed away. And then I went through some really, stressful times at work and things like that. And I found myself being very, very angry. I have some angry stories, Julie, that you would be impressed by, maybe. I don't know. But my wife encouraged me to go to counseling then, and going through that counseling, like, again, why am I so angry? Like, my anger on a scale of 1 to 10 probably made sense if I was at a 4, but I was at a 9, right? So what was that about? And so maybe it was that I hadn't really dealt with the grieving and loss of my father, right? And so that counseling was helpful. And then the second one was when I was 42, I think, I went through a battle with clinical depression. And I mean, to this day, it's like shocking to me that I'm saying that to you. But I will tell you that I started feeling the physical symptoms of it. I didn't know what it was. And I went to my medical doctor, and the doctor diagnosed me, and I was on Klonopin and Zoloft for 1 year. And then I did some more counseling, things like that. So one of the things else I would tell you is that, we need professionals, we need arrows in our quiver of people that are resources to us. And I would tell everybody that's seen this, get an annual physical. It doesn't matter what your age, get an annual physical every year. Have a doctor, right? And then know that sometimes when you start feeling feelings of overwhelming sadness or overwhelming anxiety, right? Sometimes that's medically related. You're not going to just tough that one out. And if you think, oh, I'm just going to drink my way out, no, don't do that, or eat the way out, which is what I like to do. You're not going to get there. It's going to get worse. And so the medical side, like a psychiatric medical side, and then skill set from a counselor. So both of mine were really more of necessity situations. But, I was an athlete at FSU, and I really respond well to coaching. And so when I've gone to doctors or counselors, I really have a notepad, and I take it very seriously. And I would encourage, anyone listening to do the same thing. Oh, and by the way, if anybody hears this and they are suffering and some of those things like that, they absolutely could message me, and I'm happy to tell my story or refer them to somebody or talk about it.
Thank you, John. I love your vulnerability always. And I consider you a most trusty and trustworthy mentor and partner in my own FSU journey. So my one last question, easy. What is your favorite FSU memory?
I was 18 years old, and I walked into Doak Campbell Stadium for the 1989 FSU Miami game. And just looking at that stadium with that crowd and that spirit and those fans, it was just an extremely awesome moment for me, a very, very defining. Like, there's something about a unity of a crowd that's feeling the same emotion at the same time. That we all in agreement that the Hurricanes are just awful people, but that spirit, that was back when we had the spear that was lit up. People remember that. And, as soon as you said that, that's that moment. It was just fairly impactful to me. It was a great day. Good stuff.
That's awesome. Well, thank you again, John. It's alumni and certainly volunteers like you that make us better on campus and make an impact throughout the world. So I want to thank you for taking time to share your expertise with our fellow alumni and friends who will certainly be watching this. For those of you who are joining us today, I hope you will make plans again for next Wednesday when we have Loretta Jackson Brown. She's the Health Communications Specialist within a division of the CDC and a former Inspire Award winner with the FSU Alumni Association. She'll share her thoughts on accessing trusted, credible health information in the situation we find ourselves in these days. For more information about the FSU Alumni Association, visit our website. We want to hear from you. Thank you for joining us today. And as always, go Noles.